fraud, and they have ties to a northern Utah polygamous group. Jacob and Isaiah Kingston are facing 5 new counts of money laundering. The brothers were initially charged in August with 15 counts of money laundering and false tax filing in relation to their biodiesel company. Prosecutors say the two faked records from 2010 to 2016 in order to obtain $500 million in federal tax credits
in a billion-dollar scheme to rip off American taxpayers. Lavon Termen, also known as the Lion, was convicted of conspiring with members of a polygamous sect in Utah known as the Order in one of the most audacious tax frauds in history. He joined forces with members of the polygamous Kingston clan. Jacob Kingston took a plea deal and testified against Lavon, telling jurors they had more money than they could launder, so they started buying Lamborghinis, Bugattis, private jets, yachts, and mansions in Turkey, Huntington Beach, and Utah.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amanda Ray, and I was born and raised in a polygamous cult known as the Order. I have a whole video on how I escaped and how I survived outside of the Order. I will leave the links to that video in the description box down below. Today we're not going to be talking about my story. We're going to be talking about Jacob Kingston, my cousin, who went to prison. You guys may have seen him on the news. It was actually on national news when they caught Jacob Kingston at the airport on his way to Turkey. Today we're going to be talking about his life before the fraud, while he was growing up in the cult. We both grew up in the same cult. His dad is Daniel Kingston. For those of you that are familiar with Daniel Kingston, that is his dad, and his mom is the first wife of Daniel Kingston. So we're going to be diving into the life of Jacob Kingston, his sentencing, his first wife Sally's sentencing, his mom Rachel's sentencing, and his brother's sentencing, as well as Lavon, basically his partner in crime, Lavon. We're going to be talking about Lavon's sentencing as well. I'm not as upbeat today in this video, and I think that the main reason is because I'm glad that Jacob and everyone who was doing the fraud is getting caught, but I just have this like sense of trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about some things that are triggering in this video, but especially right now. There were so many reports. There are so many reports to the police on child abuse, child neglect, sexual assault on these children, and I just feel like the police haven't done I guess it just frustrates me because it's like all of these reports that happen, all of us that are screaming, please help us, and it's like they're turning a blind eye to it. But the second that they get fraud, like the second that they get money stolen from the government, the second the government gets money stolen from them, then all eyes are on the Order. But not when there's child abuse, not when there's underage marriages. There's been a few times where something has been done. But even still, like when David Kingston went to prison for raping his niece, he only spent 4 years out of the 10-year prison sentence that he was supposed to have. And he's still, you think he's not promoting marriage to, like he married his own kids off to Paul, the leader. What is that? Paul married his nieces again? Like it's not happening. And it just frustrates me because the biggest case was the case where David went to prison, and he only went to prison for 4 out of the 10 years he was supposed to. And in that time that he was on, they were like watching him to make sure he wasn't breaking any incest rules. He was married to his half-sisters the whole time. Like it's like David gets 4 years for raping his own underage niece. And here we're going to be none of the sentencings today that I'm going to tell you, all of these sentencings today, Isaiah's, Jacob's, Sally's, Rachel's, all of them are more than David spent in prison. All of them. And David literally raped his own niece. It's like the Order's a cult, and then the government's a bigger cult. I said it. Anyway, so that's why I'm not like cracking as many jokes, because to me, I'm like, yes, I'm glad that there's justice, I guess, but is there really? It's like biased justice. Anyway, let's get into the video. Jacob Kingston is now in prison for basically helping steal $500 million in tax credits for his biodiesel fraud. We're going to be talking about, basically, it's like a battle of the polygamists. Him, his mom, his wife, one of his wives, all of them have been sentenced to prison time. We're going to be talking about Jacob's early life and what led him to basically end up in prison. Before we talk about his involvement with Washakie Renewable Energy and prison time and all of that, I want to just do a little bit of a background on Jacob and where he fits into the scheme of things. A lot of you guys already know who Daniel Kingston is, but for those of you who are new to my channel, I have a whole video on my family tree, my family bush, and it explains the leader of the cult, also known as the Order. His name is Brother Paul, and his brothers. So Daniel is Paul's brother, And Daniel, so let me say this again. Daniel is the leader of the order, the cult that I grew up in. He's the leader of the order's brother. Jacob Kingston, who we're going to be talking about, is the son of Daniel Kingston, okay? I just want to paint a picture of where Jacob Kingston fits in. A lot of you guys who watch my channel know who Daniel Kingston is, and we also have talked about on Cultic of Coffee Daniel Jr. Sorry to confuse those two Daniels, but remember Daniel Jr., number 69? He is full brothers with Jacob Kingston. They're full brothers. Daniel Jr. is number 69, and Jacob Kingston is a numbered man as well. I believe his number is 95. So they're both numbered men, and they're both sons of Rachel Ann, who is the first wife of Daniel. Daniel Kingston, so the father of Jacob Kingston, Daniel Kingston has, I believe, roughly 14 wives. But Rachel Ann is Daniel's first wife, and Rachel Ann had 13 kids with Daniel. Jacob and Daniel Jr. are the two oldest. I'm just referencing Daniel Jr. just so you guys can be like, oh, that's the family that he's in. So first I wanted to talk about Jacob's early life. He was born and raised in the order, so he was raised the way that I was raised. You know, you follow in the chain of command, obey the one above another, learn to like to do the things you ought to do. So he was raised with the same strict religion. He grows up in a family of 13 kids, but he's one of the oldest, so I feel like he didn't really know what it was like to be raised with 13 kids, because I think he moved out of the house before his mom even had 13 kids, because he ended up marrying Sally. Sally gets married to Jacob only a month after her 16th birthday, and I believe Jacob's only a year older than Sally, so they were teenagers when they got married. Jacob, at a very young age, marries his first wife, Sally, who is actually his second cousin. And not too long after that, Jacob gets engaged to my aunt, Juliana. You guys remember seeing her on Cold Cup of Coffee? He gets engaged to her, and from what I remember, Juliana really didn't want to marry Jacob, and it almost seemed like Jacob didn't want to marry her, but it was an arranged marriage. Juliana was only 15 when she was supposed to marry him. She followed through with it, but eventually she left the order and left him altogether. And it's been told to me by multiple people that Jacob Kingston didn't treat Juliana very well, and that ultimately pushed her out of the order. That was one of the reasons why she left the order. He then goes on to marry 2 more wives, so he now has a total of 3 wives. His third wife being younger than me by a couple months. Jacob starts going to school and he gets a PhD in engineering, and then that's when he starts his WRE. This is where we get into the fraud, okay? So he starts Washakie Renewable Energy. Do you guys remember the story of when Daniel beat his own daughter because she didn't want to be married to her uncle David, and it caused David to go to prison for raping his... Do you know that whole story? Well, the abuse of all of that happened in Washakie. Jacob decides he wants to start his own biodiesel company. He moves his family out to Washakie and starts Washakie Renewable Energy. And in the beginning, it was a legit business, but he was in the middle of nowhere and his competition was too high. Like, he wasn't going to be able to keep up with everyone. He starts cutting corners pretty early on. Everybody knows the order believes in bleeding the beast, so of course Jacob didn't think that bleeding the beast was bad. Bleeding the beast is like taking anything from the government you can, basically, as long as it goes to the kingdom of God. So I have some notes on this. Basically, how he was able to do the fraud is to have biodiesel and to get tax credits. So he had what's called B99 and B100. B99 is like a more diluted version of biodiesel, but basically biodiesel is, I'm gonna have the definition right here, what biodiesel is for anyone who doesn't know what it is. Jacob applies for tax credits for this biodiesel, and the tax credits were $1 per gallon of biodiesel. I heard someone who worked for Jacob said that he was actually paid to be the one to dilute the solution, and it sounds like they were diluting it. I don't know if they were diluting it more than they should be. I'm not 100% sure on all that, but he was definitely helping dilute it, and maybe he was just diluting the B99 like they were supposed to. I'm not sure, but apparently Jacob had this huge shipment of biodiesel that was supposed to be getting sold, and it was getting rejected because it wasn't pure enough. So now he has all this biodiesel and he doesn't know how to get rid of it or how to sell it, or he's going to lose money off of it. So he goes to California to try to find someone that's going to buy this biodiesel. That's where he meets Lavon. Lavon Termen, the Lion. There's sources that call him the Lion. From what I heard, he was from Turkey. Lavon owned this gas station called Noil, is that how you say it? I'll put a picture of it. Noil Gas. And I don't know, him and Jacob, I guess, just hit it off and became friends. And then Lavon flew his private jet to Salt Lake to meet Sally and Jacob's whole family. And then Lavon flew them all out to Seattle and basically wined and dined them, and that was just the beginning of a friendship. But a lot of people describe Lavon as like, he comes off as an organized crime boss. There's like a lot of people who believe that he was just a persona, and then there were people who believed he really is an organized crime boss. I don't know him, so I can't say for sure. But I think Jacob did believe that he was. Obviously, Jacob really liked the lifestyle that Lavon had. He liked that Lavon had nice things. He had nice cars. He, flew private. So, and Jacob came from a family of 13 and polygamous family at that. Like, it's not like his mom, Rachel Ann, was the only wife of Daniel's. So I'm sure Jacob grew up like a normal poor order kid. So I'm sure these flashy things that Lavon was showing and this different lifestyle really made Jacob want that. So Lavon and Jacob, this is when the fraud starts to happen, okay? So this is kind of hard to explain, but basically to do the tax fraud on the biodiesel, you had to submit paperwork to the government, to the IRS, right? So basically they just had to make it look like on paper that they were shipping this biodiesel, and then they could get the tax credits, right? So they would do these, it's like they would just ship the same biodiesel around the country to make it look like on paper it was getting shipped and there was actually being processing. So they would ship it, like Lavon's company would say that they were shipping to Utah for processing, and then they were able to get the tax write-offs, and then they would just keep doing that over and over and over until ultimately they got $500 million. So by this time, right, while they're making a bunch of money, Jacob's starting to dress different. He's starting to do more worldly things. I heard from multiple sources that he was gambling thousands and thousands of dollars at the casinos in Las Vegas. He buys a $3 million home, but also he's working with Lavon, so Lavon's getting a lot of the money as well. I was hearing too that he was flying to Turkey a lot with Lavon. They kind of were just doing a lot. They were spending a lot of time together, going on trips together, buying cars together, doing fraud together, BFF. So again, as long as they showed the documentation that the biodiesel was being shipped around, I guess it was kind of like the government was kind of lax, the IRS was kind of lax on the evidence that you need to prove that you're selling biodiesel, so they were able to scam the IRS out of millions of dollars. So obviously the government eventually catches on, and I remember at this time there were rumors going around that Jacob, this came from order members, there was rumors going around that Jacob was going to take his family and flee to Turkey. And the crazy thing is, he did buy a home, well, again, allegedly, I have to say allegedly, but order members were stating that Jacob did have a home in Turkey and that he was planning on fleeing to Turkey. But that's just allegedly. We don't know 100% if that's the truth, but Jacob was caught at the airport on his way to Turkey. He was caught and arrested in August of 2018, along with his younger brother Isaiah, who was also working with him at WRE, Washakie Renewable Energy. So this is the beginning of a long trial process, right? So they actually had Jacob in jail this whole time, waiting trial. They put a what is that thing called? The ankle bracelet on his mom, Rachel Ann, and his brother Isaiah. And then eventually they had Lavon Termen convicted March of 2020. This is like now we're getting into the bulk of like the court hearings and what was said in court, and ultimately their sentencing for what happened, for what they did. It starts to get really messy because Jacob starts to just rat everyone out. He starts to turn against the order, turn on Lavon, so it kind of gets to the point where everyone starts to hate Jacob a little bit. So he starts turning on Lavon, and Lavon starts getting mad at Jacob for turning on him. And then his mom, Rachel Ann, also gets mad at him for turning on the order. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was a public quote where she basically was like, how could you turn on your own family? It's kind of sad because it's not sad. Okay, Jacob honestly has a kind of a bad reputation even before all of this. There's some rumors that went around that he was not... I don't know how much I can say this because of the person that told me, but basically there was some not so nice things that he did to women. He just wasn't a very good guy. I don't like him that much, okay? That's what I'm saying. When I say it's kind of sad, just to clarify, like, I don't feel bad for him. The whole thing is kind of just like, his whole life just had a weird life, I guess. But I don't think that means it's okay for what he did. And also, he did some shady shit before he got into all of this too. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. So he starts to talk about how him and Lavon were working together, and he talks about this umbrella policy. And basically, Lavon was just like tricking him. It's like he was brainwashed in the order to do all this stuff, and then Lavon took advantage and preyed on that and manipulated him. So basically, this is my understanding of it, okay? I may be wording it wrong, but the umbrella policy was basically like, Lavon was like, we're doing all this illegal stuff, so in order for us to not get in trouble, I have my guy who's going to protect us. But that means that we both have to put a percentage of our money that we're making to this umbrella policy so that we're protected. And Jacob's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll give you the money so that we're protected. There was no one protecting them. Lavon was just getting the money from Jacob. Some friend Lavon is, right? I heard from order members that after all of this stuff was coming out in court, that Lavon threatened Jacob. I don't know how true this is, but I heard it from a few people that Lavon told Jacob that if Jacob ever gets out of prison, that he was going to kill him. Rachel, his mom, kind of makes it clear, obviously, she's like upset with Jacob for going against the family, because Jacob was doing all this to get a lesser sentence, right? He's trying to work with the government to get a lesser sentence, and by that, he's going against the order. So his mom and a lot of people in the order actually start getting really frustrated with Jacob for what he's doing. But his mom assisted in destruction of evidence. So his mom gets some prison time too. They put an ankle bracelet, and remember they put an ankle bracelet on his mom and his brother for how they assisted in this fraud. So in her case, let's start with her case, okay? So let's start with her sentencing, and then we'll get into Sally's sentencing, Isaiah's sentencing, and then Jacob's. I'm not gonna even talk about Lavon, how much time he got. So in Rachel's case, they were trying to plead like Rachel shouldn't have to have as much time in prison because she's gonna be 68 now, and she has high blood pressure and pre-Alzheimer's and all these like health issues. So they're like, please don't give her more than 10 years. Jacob and Isaiah did cooperate fully to try to lessen their mom's sentence. The judge decided, based off of all of the information that they had, that Rachel, since she lived her whole life crime-free, which I think is debatable. Obviously, I think a lot of you guys know that's pretty debatable, that's the first time she committed crime. But the judge decided that they would give Rachel 7 years in prison. They were gonna give her 7 years in prison. They were gonna have a supervised release after that for 3 years, and she needs to submit a DNA sample, and her restitution is $511,842,773. How do you say that number? $511,842,773. Basically half a billion dollars, okay? So meaning that she has to pay a minimum of $250 a month towards the restitution. The judge allowed, this is what I don't understand, the judge allowed the ankle bracelet to come off of Rachel and Isaiah. And they're not in jail, they're not gonna go to prison till July. Why would they take the bracelets off of them before they're going to prison in July? Maybe they want them to run so they can get a longer sentence, I don't know. Isaiah, I feel like Isaiah and Rachel were like buddy in this, and they kind of just like tried not to say anything against the order. So Rachel got 7 years and Isaiah got 12 years. Isaiah's the younger brother. Let's move on to Sally. It was interesting to see what Sally's interesting because I always thought Sally and Jacob were pretty like it was in the order, everyone kind of knew that Sally was the favorite wife. But then when Jacob got his third wife, the one that's my age, there was some ruffled feathers for sure. Cause think of it, Jacob's in his 40s and he's now with someone who's my age, and Sally's also in her 40s. So to think that Jacob's now with this little girl, not little girl, but I'm a little girl. So I do remember hearing that Sally, around the time that Jacob married this new wife, Sally ran away and like no one knew where she was at. So I think that caused some tension in the marriage. But I still thought that like Sally and Jacob were pretty like rock solid, but apparently with what happened in court, that's not the case, because Sally, she starts saying that in her plea, or whatever you call it. In the order, women are supposed to obey their husbands, right? And so they're trying to claim that Sally had no collection of any funds, like it was all Jacob, because Sally said that she begged Jacob to let her go to the hospital for her for childbirth. She was trying to go to give birth at a hospital, and Jacob said no. And Sally really wanted to go to the hospital because she was older, having a baby, so she went anyways, and she had to pay out of her own funds and have to get on a monthly payment to pay for that hospital bill. Even though in that same month, Jacob collected $11 million from the biodiesel fraud. So they were using that to claim, oh, well, Jacob didn't give any of that money to Sally. And Sally's kind of going against Jacob at this point. And part of me wonders if it's because of this whole, like, with the new wife, I don't know. And like they keep claiming like, oh, Sally was only 16 when she married him, she was manipulated into the situation, she should be let go, even though she did help Jacob to forward emails that were fraudulent and do things that were fraudulent. But they kept claiming, well, you're supposed to follow you're supposed to abide by your husband. And so she did it because of that, because of the cult. But yeah, it sounds like the order still kind of supports Isaiah, the brother, and Rachel, but they're kind of like ostracizing Sally and her family and Jacob. So let's get to Sally's sentencing. So Sally was claiming in her court case that she didn't have access to any of the money. Also, she was claiming that in 2013, she stopped working with WRE altogether. So she's claiming that she didn't have access to the money. She also stopped working with them in 2013. But the thing is, like, Sally was living in that $3 million home that was made by WRE's money, and Sally did help with forging documents, and Sally did help with the fraud. So that's, I mean, if Sally was innocent, she wouldn't be getting sentenced. So Sally ended up getting sentenced to 6 years, which I think, yeah, Sally is the least of the sentencing. So she got sentenced to 6 years in prison at the age of 45. The fact that Rachel keeps trying to claim that she's innocent, it's just crazy, because it also, like, the judge is like, well, since you lived a crime-free life before now, then we're only going to sentence you to 7 years, which is a year more than Sally. But it's like, you really think did she live a year? Did she? How did she know how to do all this fraud? There's even records showing that she was flying to Florida to instruct on how to fill these papers out for the fraud. So she knew a thing or two about fraud. Isaiah did go against Lavon. Isaiah is Jacob's younger brother. He did end up going against Lavon in court, but he did not go against the order in court. So in the order, Isaiah and Rachel are still, like, accepted, but from what I'm hearing, Sally and Jacob are kind of ostracized. That whole family is, like, ostracized because they're kind of going against the order. Because as I said before, Sally claimed that, you know, in the order I'm supposed to follow my husband, and I just did what I was told. And then Jacob, in Jacob's sentencing, even Jacob plays the whole thing of like, oh, well, I was in the order and I was just taught, I am innocent because I was taught all these things of what I was supposed to do, and I didn't know, I was just following them one above another. So they both were trying to play that victim card of the cult, this is why I'm like this. Let's get into Jacob's sentencing now. So Sally got 6 years, Rachel got 7 years, Isaiah got 12 years. Now we're getting into Jacob's sentencing. So as I said before, Jacob really liked the lifestyle that Lavon had. There was someone that said that before Lavon was even involved, the order was able to scam the government out of $70 million with this biodiesel scam. So before Lavon was even involved, apparently there was already the tax fraud going on. But I don't know how, like, where that information comes from, but it does make sense. Like, I'm sure they were just slowly doing it, and maybe when Lavon got involved, he made it quicker because he owned a gas station and could be like, oh, like, I'm shipping it to Utah for processing, right? So that it makes it look like, you know, it's more legit. So again, Jacob was arrested at the airport on his way to Turkey. A lot of people in the order believe that he was fleeing to his home in Turkey to run away from the government because of all of this tax fraud. And Lev gets convicted in March of 2020. The umbrella policy, Jacob. The umbrella policy is so dumb. Like, how dumb is Jacob? But again, it's like Jacob was manipulated by the whole order. Like, he was probably easily manipulated by Lavon. And so Lavon was able to make even more money off of this scheme than Jacob because of the umbrella policy of the boys that are protecting them, when in reality there was no one protecting them. It was just a way to get Jacob to give more of his money to be protected by these invisible people. It was just going into Lavon's pocket. So in Jacob's hearing, they actually tried to claim, well, Jacob had a psych evaluation and they concluded that he had CPTSD, so complex PTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and they were playing on the fact that he's basically a victim of the order and that he was manipulated by Lavon with the whole umbrella policy, like that Jacob was just a pawn in all of the schemes. And they were also trying to claim that like Jacob didn't get any of the money, all of the money he made was going to the order or to Lavon. Like Jacob didn't get anything, even though Jacob had that $3 million home and his nice fancy ass cars, right? But he didn't get anything else, okay? And then they're like asking, wait, what about the 11 million that he got in and he was too greedy to give it to Sally when Sally needed the money to go to the hospital? Why didn't he let Sally go to the hospital and then he pocketed the 11 million? What are you talking about? And then their response was just like, basically Jacob's whole play in the courtroom was like, I gave all my money, incomings and outgoings, to my dad Daniel, to the ones over me, and then the rest was given to Lavon, so I didn't get to pocket anything. But that is such bullshit, because he bought that $3 million home, he had those nice vehicles, and I know people who watched him gamble in Vegas thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. And then there's this, I have to say rumor, because I didn't see the house myself, but multiple order people have told me that Jacob has a home in Turkey, and that's why he was trying to fly to Turkey when he got arrested. So if Jacob doesn't have access to any of the money, how did he have a $3 million home? How did he have his nice cars? How was he gambling thousands of dollars in Vegas? And how did he have property in other countries? I rest my case, Your Honor. This is something I don't know how true this is, but it was said in the courtroom somewhere that Jacob had tried to hire a hitman. What the hell? I don't know the full story on that, but it was something to do with like so that he wouldn't get caught. He tried to like hire a hitman to like take someone out. Anyway, all of this drama happens right from the beginning of WRE to now he gets convicted and he has to serve an 18-year sentence. He's going to prison for 18 years. When he gets released, he's going to have a supervised release for, I think it's 3 years. He will not be able to own a firearm or ammunition. He has to give a DNA sample, and his restitution is the same amount, that $511,842,700, $500 million is restitution. Any tax returns or lottery winnings has to be put towards the restitution. I think they sold his mansion and cars and put that towards the restitution as well, I think, because they don't live in that house anymore. But they did allow him to have, because ever since he got caught from the airport, right, they had him in jail that whole time. So he's been in jail for 4 years, right, because they caught him in August of 2018. So he's been in jail for 4 years. He's been in jail for 4 years, and the judge is allowing that 4 years be put towards his 18-year sentence. So that technically means he only has 14 years. They didn't do that to Isaiah, though. They let Isaiah out, and now Isaiah has to do the 12. So basically, Jacob only has 2 years more than Isaiah. So yeah, Sally 6 years, Rachel 7 years, Isaiah 12 years. Jacob has 18, technically 14 because he already served 4 in jail. Lavon got the most prison time. And I think maybe it's because Lavon has a history. I'm not 100% sure why Lavon got this much, but Lavon was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and Lavon is 56 years old. And I think also it's just because Lavon wasn't cooperating. Lavon was really upset. He was very angry. He was yelling at the jury and the judge, and he was just mad. He's a mad man. But that's also why I believe what order members said about Lavon. They said that Lavon threatened and told Jacob that if he ever gets out of prison, he's going to kill him. So I do believe that because Lavon seems like a very troubled man. There's a lot of myths that went around that I do want to correct. Obviously, the main myth was that Jacob was going to get out and that Heavenly Father was going to help them all get out, which that's not the case. They're all serving that prison time. And then there was this article that said that Jacob and Lavon were like best friends until Lavon met Jacob's third wife, Hannah, and fell in love with her. And then they started to have like an affair. I'll show you guys the website. It's completely false. There's this whole piece in there that says that Hannah went to go visit Lavon and gave him blankets while he was in prison. Anyone who knows anything about prison, you can't just like give blankets to, the article is so dumb, but. And And so they're trying to claim that that's where the rivalry started, that Jacob and Lavon started hitting each other over this love triangle, and that's not true at all. Just wanted to clear that up. But yeah, so that's I just wanted to make this video to state, because I saw a lot of things online that were saying everything about them getting arrested, but they didn't, there was no updates on like how long the prison time was and what's to come of all of that. So now you guys know, Sally got 6 years, his mama got 7 years, his brother got 12 years, and he got 18, well 14, and then Lavon got 40 years. So that's where we're at right now. And if you guys want any more information on, I guess, I don't know if you guys want, if this was help, I don't know. I tried not to make it super confusing. I think I made it a little bit confusing on like tying everything in together, but just to reiterate, Jacob is the son of Daniel, and Daniel is the brother to the leader of Paul. And so it's just kind of shocking to me that Rachel got prison time, but Daniel didn't. Like, these men are really good at not putting their names on anything, not tying themselves to anything, not getting caught. But they're very involved, but they're just not getting caught because they're good at not, like, washing their hands, you know what I mean? So anyway, so that's the story of the biodiesel fraud, and Jacob is currently serving his sentence in a Utah prison. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on Sunday for Cold a Cup of Coffee. Bye!